So before we get into some of the sports legal issues that you've worked on, and we've got to save a decent chunk of time for Marion Jones's story, what got you into the world of sports law? Like, what was your first opening? You said you started a marketing company. What was your entree into this world, to use your law degree in a sports way?
Yeah, the entree probably was, back in 1978, the Ted Stevens Act was passed. And the Ted Stevens Act basically broke up the Amateur Athletic Union, the AAU. The AAU was a cartel back before 1978, meaning the AAU was the umbrella organization under which all the national governing bodies of Olympic sport existed. The AAU they were the power. Passed in 1978, which basically broke up that monopoly. And as a result, every Olympic sport got their own national governing body organization to govern their sport. And for track and field, it became the Athletics Congress. Acronym was the TAC. So the TAC was created in 1978, and I was lucky enough to be around and be a part of it. And one of the outgrowths of the TAC was that we as athletes decided that we wanted a say. We were not going to be dictated to anymore. The AAU was gone. We now have a democratic organization, and we're going to have a part in it. So we as track and field athletes coalesced pretty quickly and demanded that we have an athletes advisory committee with funding. We wanted 20% funding of the TAC so we could do what we needed to do for athletes. So we got that done. I was a vice president of the AAC, the Athletes Advisory Committee. Ultimately, the whole Athletes Advisory Committee framework was adopted by International Olympic Committee, the U.S. Olympic Committee, and all national governing bodies of Olympic sport. So I was at the forefront of that, groundbreaking stuff. In 1979, a group of us, athletes, four of us, Edwin Moses, me, Harvey Glantz, and Dorian Lamberlet, decided, the Eastern Bloc countries and the Soviet Union, we know they're doping. We know they're taking drugs to enhance their performances, and we got to put a stop to it. Otherwise, we're not going to be competitive on the world stage, period. So we as us four athletes put our heads together, went out and got an employment lawyer from Wilmer Cutler and Pickering, Jim Coleman, and we created, over the next 2 years, the most stringent in-competition drug testing protocols in Olympic sport. Still exists today. The challenge we had was the challenge we never thought. The challenge was convincing the United States Olympic Committee and the International Olympic Committee, the IAAF, which is the world governing body of track and field, to adopt these drug testing standards and protocols. They didn't want to do it. Why? Politics and money, period.
Yeah.
But we were undeterred, and we pushed it through. And ultimately, in 1984, after 4 or 5 years of fighting, the powers that be, as athletes, smart athletes, lawyers, we got the in-competition drug testing protocols adopted and first implemented at the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. Otherwise, we weren't running.
Kind of fantastic irony, because the way we really got to know each other well was working with Marion Jones, who you had been called upon. You were Marion's advisor. Of course, we're talking about the 5 gold medal winning athlete, one of the greatest athletes maybe of our lifetimes. How did you get into a world where, was it through this reform effort that you were working on? How did you get connected with Marion? And tell me a little bit about your first impressions of Marion Jones.
It's interesting how I got involved with Marion. Her agent, I knew Charlie Wells. I knew Charlie from my days in college running track. Charlie went to Arizona State University, and I was at Dartmouth, and we had that mile relay team, which actually beat Arizona State University's mile relay team. And he was enamored with the fact that these 4 brothers from Dartmouth, no athletic scholarship, could get out here and beat our ass in the NCAA championships. Hats off to Nichols and his comrades. So he always called me money. And I lost contact with Charlie, and I didn't see him again from 1976. I didn't see Charlie again until 1997 at the Sports Lawyers Conference. And I was on a panel talking about something, I forget what it was. And he came up to me and he said, hey, Rich, man, it's good to see you. I'm representing Marion Jones. Marion had just graduated from college. I said, yeah, I know who Marion is. He said, I might be needing your services. I said, okay, fine, just call me whenever. So the next year, beginning of 99, actually, he did call me. I had just joined Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich & Rosati, doing high-tech venture capital deals in Silicon Valley. And Charlie called me and said, hey, I need you to help me do Marion's deals, all her endorsement deals going into the 2000 Olympic Games. I said, hey, okay, fine, I can do that stuff in my sleep. So I took her on as a client in 1999, negotiated all of her endorsement deals going into the 2000 Olympics. She made the pronouncement in 1999 that she wanted to win 5 gold medals at the Olympic Games. I had never been done before. And I did all of her deals, and I never met her. Paper the transactions and got them done. She wanted me to go to the Olympic Games in Sydney in 2000, but I couldn't go because I was in the middle of a transaction. In fact, it was a sports transaction. I had a client that was trying to buy the Continental Basketball Association, the CBA, and we were in the middle of due diligence, so I couldn't go to Sydney. And Charlie was disappointed I couldn't go because I think he had the presence of mind to figure out that there was going to be a drug controversy involving Marion's husband at the time at the Sydney Olympic Games, and he wanted me to be there. So right after Marion won the 100 meters in Sydney, her first gold medal, it was announced positive for steroids, and he was a world champion shot putter. And so I ended up advising Charlie and Marion on what to do. It's my first crisis thing. I didn't even know I was doing a crisis management deal then. But I advised them from afar. I was in Palo Alto. They were in Sydney. I advised them on how to deal with the media, on how to deal with Nike, how to deal with all of it, so she could get through the Olympic Games unscathed. This was not her problem. This was her husband's problem. Let the legal system take its course, and she'll support whatever outcome is at the end. So that was my first foray into that drug testing madness. So Marion went fourth. She won 5 medals at the Olympic Games, 3 gold, 2 bronze. Came home. She called me in December of 2000, said, Rich, I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. I want to meet you. I'm getting an ESPY award in Las Vegas in February. I'm going to invite you. And we met, hit it off, and began to represent her as a person.
Yeah.
From that point.
And all sorts of highs, all sorts of lows, like for many of us, but hers were very prominent worldwide highs and lows. I'm sure most people watching this know Marion Jones's story, but for those who don't, she wins the medals. She goes through a grand jury investigation. She's associated with Balco, the organization that allegedly peddled the steroids, where Barry Bonds was involved, and a lot of the Major League Baseball athletes, a lot of track athletes, ultimately leading in her being stripped of her medals, going to jail, a real rise and fall, and as we both know, a rise again story. Take us to the grand jury, the story that I've heard you tell before about being in the room with Marion at the grand jury when she's asked a question, thinks about taking a break, doesn't, that whole story. If you'd set that picture in everybody's mind.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't at the grand jury. It was at a meeting that my co-counsel, Joe Burton, who's a great white-collar criminal lawyer, a meeting that we were having with the prosecutor and the IRS agent / accountant / drug investigator. So I'll give you the backstory. So in September 5th of 2003, I was in my office, had moved to Texas because Marion wanted us to move to Texas, so we moved to Texas. So I was in my office. And I had CNN alerts on my computer screen, and this alert popped up that said the federal government had raided the Balco labs in Burlingame, California, and uncovered 27 file folders of prominent athletes who looked like they were involved in steroids. And the 3 names that they published in that story were Barry Bonds, Jason Giambi, and Marion Jones. I thought, ooh, that's not good. So I forwarded her the story and told her to call me. She didn't call me. We knew Victor Conti from Balco. Why? Because he stalked us at track meets. He would sit behind us at track meets trying to get our attention, blah, blah, blah. He was kind of a strange kind of a guy. He was the head of Balco Labs. The IRS was investigating Balco and Victor for tax improprieties Jeff Nowitzki was the IRS investigator who literally did dumpster dives. He dove in a dumpster behind Balco Labs one night and found these file folders with these athletes' names on it, put two and two together, and kind of figured that Balco was probably creating and distributing steroids to these top athletes. So that's how her name found its way to federal government. So she didn't respond. So I let a few weeks go by. Resent the email, no response. I told her agent, I said, look, it's not a question of if, question of when she's going to get a grand jury subpoena. So when she does, I know she's going to call me. She got the subpoena. How did she get it? She just walked up to her front door on her birthday when she was having a party, handed her the subpoena. She freaked out, called me right away, and the saga began. I went out immediately and hired Joseph Burton, who was a great white-collar criminal lawyer, former chief assistant U.S. attorney in the Northern District of California, where the Balco case was brought. We sat Marion down over 3 8-hour sessions to debrief her and prep her for the grand jury. It was kind of a different kind of a grand jury situation. Now, usually the federal government, they'll give you some idea of what they've got that involves your client. But in this case, they told us two things. We're not after the athletes. We're after Victor Conti. So they had really no information that they were going to give us. So we debriefed her over a 24-hour period. And when we got to the point where we thought we had some nucleus of her involvement or lack thereof, it was about a week before her scheduled grand jury appearance, and we weren't comfortable with what we had. We weren't comfortable that we had prepared her properly for the unknown. So we made a strategic decision. And that decision was to reach out to the U.S. attorney and to Jeff Nowitzki and say, look, we want to bring our client in for what's called a Queen for a Day pre-grand jury interview. So they said, great. So we negotiated this Queen for a Day agreement. Queen for a Day means it's use immunity. It means that for the time in which you're being interviewed by the government, whatever you tell them, they can't use that against you to prosecute you. But you have to tell the truth. If you lie, they can prosecute you for lying to federal investigators. Did that deal, took Marion down for this interview in the Fairmont Hotel in San Jose. Usually these situations are in small, cramped government rooms with no windows and peeling paint and crummy furniture so you can be uncomfortable. But we were at the Palatial Fairmont in San Jose. We had a window, it was a nice day, and we're at this conference table. It's Marion's in the center. Joe Burton is to her right. I'm to her left. Across the table is Jeff Nedrow, the assistant U.S. attorney, and Jeff Nowitzki, the investigator. And it was slated for a 3-hour interview. So Jeff Nowitzki had a duffel bag on the floor, and he would reach down and he'd pull out a document at a time, drop it across the table, ask Marion to look at it. Do you recognize this? He'd ask her questions, and he'd move on. So 2.5 hours into this, a big, clear sandwich bag. And inside that sandwich bag were 2 smaller sandwich bags. In one of those bags was a vial of some olive oil colored liquid. And the other was a small tube of toothpaste, unlabeled, unused, and he put them on the table. Now, the backdrop to this is, in June of 2003, and this interview is in November of 2003, in June of 2003, Marion's ex-coach, who we fired in November of 2002, sent a syringe full of some liquid anonymously to the United States Anti-Doping Organization, agency. And they sent it to the UCLA lab that decompiled it. And by August of 2003, the lab, Dr. Cantlin, who was the foremost expert in steroids at the time, announced that was in this anonymously sent syringe was an old steroid, acronym is THG, but the present property of that steroid was that it didn't show up in your blood in a blood test, and it didn't show up in your urine in a drug test at a competition. So it was called the clear. Why? Because your urine and your blood, if you took this steroid, would be clear, and you'd pass the drug test and you'd be good to go. We knew that going into this meeting with the feds. But we had never seen the clear or the clear testosterone cream that we had been told was in these tubes. So when he pulled the stuff out, Marion put 2 and 2 together and thought, well, that must be the clear. So the agent stands up. He's 6'6", he's balding, he has a gun on his hip, He reaches across, he pulls out the plastic bag with the liquid in it, and he shakes it in front of her face and says, "Do you know what this is?" And she looked at it and she says, "No, I don't." And then he got a little belligerent. "You mean to tell me you've never seen or taken this substance before?" And she says, "I've never seen it. I've never taken it." Then he got a little angry. So I stopped him. I said, "Hey, look, time out. Let's go in the hallway and talk about this." So Joe Burton, he got up and he walked out the door. I got up and I looked back at Marion and she had this vacant look on her face. It's one of those situations that you've gone through in life where you take note of something, some split-second thing that happened. You just take note of it. You don't know why, but there's something there. She had a vacant look on her face. And I walked down to the hallway and we talked to the U.S. attorney and the agent. And we said, "Look, if you want to ask her that question, no need to be belligerent. Be polite and respectful, and she'll answer the question." So we went back in the room. He asked her the question again. She says, "No, I don't know what that is. Never seen it, never took it, don't know what it is." And that pretty much ended the interview. She went to the grand jury the next week. She was in and out of there in 40 minutes. So we figured we're good to go. That's 2003, November of 2003. But this investigation really was just starting, and it dogged her. It was everywhere in the media. She's trying to train for the Olympic Games, for the Olympic trials, and this Balco thing was just, it was a crucible. We were at the front of the news every day, all day for months. She ultimately did make the Olympic team in the long jump, and she was on the 4x100 relay team. But the pressure was so immense that she didn't make the team in the 100 meters. She came in fifth, but had the longest long jump of the year that year. And we hope she go to the Olympic Games and win something. But it was just unbelievable. And by the end of the Olympic Games, she didn't win any medals. She won nothing, and which was devastating to her and to us. And we moved on, hoping that this thing was done. But it wasn't. It wasn't done at all. And fast forward to 2006, 2007, the U.S. Attorney's Office reached out to me and said, "Hey, look, all bets are off. We've got new information. We think she lied in 2003." And it turned out that she had not told the truth. She did recognize the liquid as the clear, as something that her coach had given her. She didn't ask any questions about it. It was not unusual for coaches of elite athletes like that to give their athletes supplements and substances before and after practice. It wasn't unusual. He gave her the clear as drops under her tongue after workouts. Between the time she made the Olympic team in June of 2000 and the Olympic Games in September of 2000, and she didn't need that stuff, but he gave it to her. She recognized it when she saw it, and instead of saying, "Take a time out, I want to go into the hallway and talk to my lawyers," which would have been fine. We could have come back in. She could have told the truth, but she was afraid. She said, I said, "Look, Marion, if you had just taken a break, and gone into the hallway for 30 seconds, and if you told us that you recognized that, it might have been something that you took. They just wanted your testimony, against other people. They weren't going after you. We could have worked out a deal." She said, and this is years later, of course, when she's telling me, she said, "Look, my life passed before me. I was sitting there, I saw that, and I recognized it. I thought, God, if I tell the truth and I admit that I know what that stuff is, or that I took it, I'll lose everything. And all the people, my family that's depending upon me financially." And she said, 30 seconds, it just passed my eyes. And during that time when you guys were in the hallway and came back in, I decided I just wasn't going to tell the truth. And I was going to lie about it.
It's an amazing story. She went to jail for it, obviously. And you were prominent in what I think is, I'm biased, but I think a lot of people would say one of the best 30 for 30s on ESPN that have ever been done, directed by the great, may he rest in peace, John Singleton, and about her life and about her return. But before we get to kind of her return and reflection, are there things that you think about, as a lawyer? We've all been in that position where, you're at a difficult moment with a client. Are there things you think about, and if you could hit the rewind, you would hit the rewind? I know Marion's felt like she made that second mistake, which we all recognize is the worst mistake. The first mistake is always fixable. That second one's not. Are there things that you wish you had back, or are there lessons that you learned that other people, listening to this, who might be in that difficult situation with a client one day, could benefit from?
Well, no, I can't think of anything that I could have or would have done differently because I believed her and I trusted her and I believed her. Period. So there was no reason to think otherwise. I do think at times back to that vacant look she had on her face, that split second when I walked out of the room and she had that vacant look on her face. Maybe I should have pursued that, but I had no context within which to pursue that because I believed her. I believed her. Period. And so I don't know. You have to have faith in your client. You have to believe your client. I mean, you were involved, and we ultimately after 2012 report in December of 2004, where Victor Conti basically bold-faced lied about Marion, that he had given her syringes and had given her human growth hormone, all lies, total lies. And we pursued that. You filed a $25 million defamation action against Victor Conti and Balco Labs based upon Marion telling the truth. so you were invested too. We all were.
Yeah.
And it was a very painful day. It was like October 1 of 2007 when she wrote me a letter to tell me. And the circumstances there were, in March of 2007, I got a call from the U.S. Attorney in New York, and Southern District of New York. Why the Southern District of New York? Tim Montgomery, former boyfriend, had been involved in a check fraud scandal. And he had passed one of the bad checks to Marion to repay her for, of all things, for Marion having paid his legal fees in the Balco investigation. So he wrote her a check that was involved in this scandal. When that was made public, I had to take her up to the Southern District of New York, which is no fun. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, you don't want to ever be on their bad side. But I took her up there and to be interviewed, and she was a witness in that case. And ultimately, and that was in August of 2006, and ultimately by March of 2007, 1 month before Tim Montgomery's trial in this check fraud case, I get a call from the U.S. Attorney, and she said, "Hey, look, we think Marion lied to us, and we think she lied in San Francisco 4 years ago." So with that, very painful to tell her that, and to tell her that, hey, look, I can't represent you. I can't represent you in this. Why? Because they think I'm suborning perjury because I've been your lawyer through all this. And they're telling me that you lied, not only in this case in the Southern District of New York about these checks, in Balco 4 years ago. So I can't represent you. But I'm going to find you somebody who will. She had no money. I'll find you somebody that will. And they'll do a good job. It was hard. It was hard, tearful.
Just like a daughter to you. I mean.
Yeah, that's right. Telling her I can't help her. Can't help you. Not only can I not help you, Marion, after I turn you over to the next lawyer, who was Hill Allen from Tharrington and Smith in North Carolina, great white-collar criminal lawyer, I can't even talk to you about any of this at all. So that's what I did. I got Hill Allen from Tharrington and Smith in Raleigh, North Carolina, great firm. They had handled Marion's divorce from C.J. back in 2001. They took it on pro bono. Hill took her on pro bono. He took her to the Southern District of New York for the fateful interview, and that was in April of 2007. And between April of 2007 and September, they worked out whatever deal they were going to work out. I didn't talk to Hill Allen during that time. I didn't talk to Marion during that time. I worried about me during that time. I didn't know what to think. Painful as a lawyer, as a person. It was hard. It was one of the hardest times of my life. Certainly one of the hardest times of my career. And on a Saturday, Hill called me, September 30th, September 29th, somewhere there in 2007. He said, "Look, we're done. The government got what they wanted and what they needed, and I'm calling to tell you that Marion's going to plead guilty to 2 counts of lying to federal investigators. She's going to enter that plea next Friday, which is October 5th. And I can tell you, Rich, that the person she's most anxious about telling about all this is you. But she's going to tell you." Okay. So 2 days later, I got this letter. I got a 5-page letter from Marion. Hard to read. But she basically came clean and apologized to me and hoped that I would forgive her for having jeopardized my career and having invested in her and for risking my reputation for her. And she felt bad that she lied. And it was really a cathartic letter. It was. So I read it. I called her, left her a voicemail message, told her I forgave her. Don't worry about it. Just do what's best for you. And that was that. And then 5 days later is when she, everybody, I think, remembers the courthouse steps speech she gave after she was sentenced to 6 months in prison. She's the only athlete ever in history to have gone to prison for anything related to steroids. She was made an example of, bottom line. Bad, wrong time, wrong place. And she ended up, ironically, going to prison right here at Carswell in Fort Worth, like 20 minutes from my house. I thought, my God, in prison 20 miles from my house. I had a hard time dealing with that.
Yeah, and it wasn't an easy 6 months for her. For those who are interested, you should watch the 30 for 30, but it was a powerful one. I remember when you and I met at Starbucks, and then I watched it on the plane, and I couldn't hold back the tears watching it. But it's a wonderful story because she now realizes, from what I can see, what's important in life. And, I had to ask you the question about would you do anything differently, because this is such a tricky situation. And as you say, I sat in a conference room with her for hours and believed her. She's very articulate. There's physical evidence for why it didn't make sense, certainly as Victor Conti was alleging, as you said. And yet, sometimes we just have to go through that valley to get back out of it. And she certainly has, with a women's professional basketball career. She's doing wonderful things, affecting people's lives in such wonderful ways now. And the story has a happier ending than what we would have thought would have happened. So thank you for sharing that. I know it's a very emotional story.
It's still hard.
Yeah.
It is. She paid the price for everybody and never blamed anybody. To this day,
no.
Never. She said, Rich, I asked you a basketball question. It's on me.
Yeah.
40 days in solitary confinement because her roommate tried to kill her in prison. She had to defend herself. 49 days in solitary confinement. Think about that.
Yeah.
It's terrible. She's not bitter. She's not angry. She's just a gem of a person. Because I know I'd be real pissed off and I'd be angry at somebody if it was me. Go through that, but not at all.
What do you take? We're going to get into women's soccer, which is probably the last big story we have time for, even though there's so many great ones. What sticks with you as a principal? You're one of the top crisis communication lawyers, consultants in the world, because you've dealt with these issues, and we haven't even recounted a lot of the really interesting ones that you've dealt with. But what are some of the things that when you're talking to clients today that you draw upon from your experience with Marion and Balco?
I tell clients you got to tell the truth, period. The old saying is the truth will set you free. It's true. It will. Now, the truth is not comfortable. The truth is oftentimes very painful, but it ultimately is going to be the key to your freedom and your salvation. It is. And it's real tough to get clients to wrap their heads around the truth. They want to dance. They want to skate. They want to hide things. Ultimately, the truth is going to come out. So it's easier for you to bring the truth out than to have somebody bring it out and force you to face it. I guess the definitive book about crisis communications was written by Lonnie Davis, of all people. And the title of the book is Truth to Tell, Tell It All, Tell It Early, and Tell It Yourself. That is it. That's the watchword of success in crisis management and crisis communications. It's not easy, but that's the deal. I've met with clients for the first time and sit there for 8 hours, talking with them about the truth. I need the truth. What you tell me right now is not the truth. It might be what you want to be the truth, but it is not the truth. And if you don't get in front of it, if you don't face your truth and get control of your truth and be able to tell your truth in the context within which it needs to be told to save your brand and your reputation, I can't help you. In fact, I'm not even going to take you as a client because I'm not going to deal with lies.
Right.
I'm not.
You're basically manufacturing puzzle pieces that don't fit into the big puzzle. So eventually someone's going to find that piece and stick it in there, and
Right.
it's not going to fit.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And to the extent that a client faces the truth right away, then we can get ahead of it. We can manage it. We can manage your messaging and how we present your truth and when we present your truth. Because if you don't do it that way, someone else is going to present your truth in the context in which they want to tell your truth.
Yeah.
And the way they want to tell your truth is not going to help you at all. I had a case where there was an email, very high profile public case where there was an email that the lawyers that I was working with on this case discovered early on. And I saw that email and I said, wow, anybody reading that email out of context, I know the context now within which that email was written, but anybody reading that out of context is going to think that you are guilty. What do you mean? What I just said. I told that to this client's lawyers. I told that to this client's wives. We have to get this email out because it's going to come out because there are 2, 3 institutions that have that email. None of those 2 or 3 institutions have your best interest at heart. And you've been indicted. We need to get it out and build and tell the context within which that email was written, sent, received, read, archived.
Yeah.
Nope. Don't want to do it. Okay. Fast forward about 6 months. I get a call from a CNN reporter. They have the email. I said, well, what you going to do with it? Well, we're going to go with it. I said, give me 24 hours. Okay, we'll give you 24 hours. So I get with the clients and the lawyers to get this email out and tell the context within which it was written and received and archived. The archive part is the problem. Right? They don't want to do it. I said, well, let me give you an example of what happens when you get out in front and you can build the context around something that could bury you. I said, did you all watch the O.J. Simpson trial? Yeah. Do you remember the glove? Do you remember when O.J. put on the glove? Yeah, I remember that. Where did O.J. go after he put on the glove? What do you mean? I said, where did he go after he put on the glove? I said, he went home. That's where he went after he put on the glove. The glove set him free. The glove, which could have convicted him, he got the chance to put that glove on and build his story, his context. It was the demonstrative evidence that told the story, that built the context for the glove that would have convicted him, set him free. He went home. You guys need to do the same thing with this email.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't do it. They didn't do it. I mean, I understand it.
Yeah.
But that's the hardest part. The truth.
Yeah, it's looking in the mirror sometimes, whether your truth is an email or something you said. But it's a lesson very few people get to learn the way you've seen it play out. I told you before about walking into the worldwide headquarters of Arthur Andersen, and it was the Monday after after the jury gave him basically the death penalty and killed Arthur Andersen, and I met with Nancy Temple, who sent the email out that said basically, explaining the document retention policy is a nice way to say it, but these are big decisions at big moments, and if you could help a client get there through working with them and getting them a little more comfortable with the truth, boy, and I know there's nobody better to do that. So I don't want to run out of time. I've got basically 2 things I want to ask you about before we wrap up, and then I'm going to have some wrapping questions. The first is you got an honor that very few people get to meet John Singleton, who passed away not long ago, and we met right after he passed away, not long after.
Died a year ago today.
A year ago today. And, one of the great directors in Hollywood, really, and he did such a great job on 30 for 30 on Marion's story and took that story. What was something you picked up from him? What made him great? What gave him the ability to tell a story that showed that trajectory in such an authentic way that Marion went through? Because I know how much you admire him and you got to spend time with him.
Authenticity. Authenticity it's really the watchword of success. It just is. Because people can feel it when they meet you. If you're authentic, they want to be with you. They trust you immediately. And that's what Marion and I felt with John. So we got a call. The way we got involved with the 30 for 30 was that Mike Tolan was an executive producer for the 30 for 30 series back in 2009. Mike Tolan is the executive producer for the Last Dance, which is the documentary that's airing as we speak about Michael Jordan. Talked to Mike
I'm
last
watching
week.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. So am I. So Mike reached out to me. I met Mike years ago at Stanford. Good guy. He reached out to me and said, Rich, I know she just got out of prison. Things are kind of sensitive, but we're doing this 30 for 30 film series on 30 athletic icons made by 30 iconic filmmakers. John Singleton really wants to do this film. He loves Marion. Will you guys consider it? So we thought about it, talked about it. We decided, okay, we'll go out to L.A. We went to Mike's house in Beverly Hills to meet with John Singleton and his producer, Paul Hall. And John was authentic, more authentic than you could ever believe. So we get in there, and he's a real soft-spoken guy. And he says, Marion, I've loved you since I watched you run in high school in Thousand Oaks, California. I followed your career. And what they did to you was an abomination. He said, when I heard your speech on the courthouse steps, I was on the 405. I had to pull over in the breakdown lane because I had to cry. And he started to cry as he was telling us his story. He said, there's no way you should have suffered that kind of pain. And I want to know your story. And the world wants to know your story. And I'm going to let you tell your story in your own words. I promise you. He was authentic, crying, grown man, crying tears. So we did the deal with him. And he said, I'm going to take my time doing this film. He took a year and a half to produce this film. And he told us, he said, and I'm going to give Rich the final cut on this film before I send it to ESPN. Something that has to go, it's going to go. Great. Year and a half to do this film. John took his time. He was in it deep. He came to Keller. He spent days here in my house at Keller just, to get it right. And he did. He really got it right. And when I got the call to go to L.A., to go to his studio on a Sunday afternoon, 2 in the afternoon, just sit in there and just watch this thing, the screening of it, I was crying like a baby. It was great. It was done. It was finished. And he said, well, Rich, ESPN, because it's been a year and a half since we started this, things have happened. They're going to want to change some of this stuff. I said, tell them it's not going to change. And he said, well, when I hear from them, I'll just send you the email. Cool. So he did. He sent me the email. 4 or 5 questions they had. They wanted to reshoot some scenes. I just emailed them back. I said, John, we're not answering those questions. We're not reshooting any scenes, period. That was the end of it. And the film aired. Authenticity. The guy was just authentic. And, for John to be gone is unbelievable. Last time I talked to John was in a crisis management kind of a situation. It was August of 2018. I got a call from John because he had been lied about in the black media and was accused of sexual harassment during this Me Too thing. And he was livid about it. And he couldn't believe that this reporter who he had taken under his wing and was accusing him of this madness. And he didn't know what to do. I said, well, John, I'll help you out. Don't worry about it. We'll be good. So I kind of took care of John. That was the last time I talked with him. We texted back and forth because his great television show Snowfall came out that summer, and we texted back and forth. But when Paul Hall called me and told me that John had died, it was unreal. I couldn't believe it. I went to his memorial service. I still can't believe he's gone. I just can't believe it. Great person, talented filmmaker, to say the least.
Tragically early.
51.
Yeah, 51.